Hello and welcome to the Matt's Movie Reviews podcast. I am your host, Matthew Pejkovic, and this is episode number 617. Releasing July 12 in theaters and on video on demand is Sorry, Not Sorry, a documentary that delves into the sexual misconduct of comedian Louis C.K. and the impact his actions and subsequent comeback had upon his victims. A delve into the power dynamics of the stand-up comedy world, in which a king jester can display morally unconscionable sexual behavior and then use it as a punchline to the applause of his loyal subjects. Sorry, Not Sorry also provides opportunity for the women who spoke up about his sexual misconduct to tell their story. And joining me now are the directors of Sorry, Not Sorry, CARA MONES and Caroline Sue. Thank you both very much for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
So, Caroline, I want to ask you first. A through line that I have when I watched your film is that where do we draw the line when it comes to the things happening with Louis C.K. In other examples just like that? For yourself, you were a fan of Louis' work before these reports came out. So when you read about Louis, the stuff that he did in regards to, all the stories regarding his, let's just call it his very despicable behavior. When did you begin drawing those lines, and did those lines begin to shift even further when you start doing your research for this documentary?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, definitely. I mean, to be honest, when the article first came out, my initial private reaction was, "Oh, is this that bad that he should be, withdrawing completely from the scene?" And then, that feeling kind of evolved, like when he came back and when it became clear he wasn't really that sorry. I think about what had happened, my view really kind of evolved as I learned more. And then I'm working on the film and putting all of the just facts together, it did really change my opinion about him and even his work, really.
Cara, the movie is about Louis, but it isn't necessarily about him. It's about the impact that his actions had upon other people, especially the victims. And in this movie, we got Jen, we got Abby, we got Megan. How important was it to make sure that your film had their stories, their reactions, their truth to be presented? Because throughout this whole kind of ordeal, it just seems like that a lot of the times their experiences were used, maybe just in a paragraph here or a sentence there, but their voice itself wasn't really heard. Well, at least I don't think until like this documentary kind of came out or will be coming out.
Yeah, I think for us, their stories and their points of view were essential. I think that this was never meant to be a Louis C.K. biopic. And I think the hope, we had both realized how little we'd known about the women who'd spoken out against Louis and the backlash that they had faced. So it was really important to find a way to structure the film to really let these individuals speak at length. With the New York Times article, an article by its nature has to focus on the facts. And like you said, these are short paragraphs. You can't really meet a person fully and understand who they are. So it was important to hear from them at length and also, see that this is just one part of their life. Why is it that, speaking about this one thing has become who they are? They're distilled down to victims in articles, like one monolith, but these are all individuals with very different points of view and different lives. And this is just one aspect of who they are. This is just, one thing that they had spoken about, but it's not their whole life.
Yeah, it's not what defines them as an overall. Like they have their own careers, they have their own artistic endeavors, they have their own, being who they are, and this one thing here isn't just like who they are or what they've done. There's so much more to them. But I think the thing that really kind of struck me, Caroline, is that when Jen talks about how there was no real rule book for the position she was kind of put in because she wanted to talk about this stuff. She alluded to some of this stuff. And then when the cat came out of the bag, so to speak, there's a great line in the movie. I forgot to say it, but she was thrown into a war without any battle training. I thought that was a really kind of great line. What do you think that did to her overall? What do you think that does to a person when they're thrown into a situation like that, where they have to not only talk about an experience that was very incredibly, traumatic to them, but then to have people kind of questioning them and getting all these kind of nasty comments and such? I'm sure that the psychological battles in regards to that and the like would be just so incredibly difficult for Jen or any other person, really.
Yeah. I mean, I think, some people would say that the incident with Louis was damaging in some way, but really what came after was way more traumatic. So all of the backlash that they received for just saying simply what happened to them, which he admitted to the day after the article came out, he said, these things are true. Just people just still were so angry and hateful toward the women just for saying what happened to them when asked. So I think, it is, she was thrown into this maelstrom, and she had a full career that she really couldn't even talk about that much afterward, her actual work, because people only wanted to talk about this with her. So you kind of see how the damaging effects come from all sides. They're not saying like my life was ruined because he masturbated in front of me or because he said these things to me. It's really like the way everyone responds, which is also, traumatic.
Please support Matt's movie reviews on Patreon. Get access to exclusive content, request movie reviews and top 10 lists, and help support my work. Please click on the Patreon link in the description below. Cara, when I talk to documentary filmmakers, sometimes when they dive into kind of like the archive footage process, sometimes there are things that can pop up that can add new light, give new information and such. There were a couple of things about the archive footage that I found incredibly interesting in your movie. First off, I found it really interesting how there are a number of interviews in there, the people doing the interviews were Matt Lauer and Charlie Rose talking about these issues, and when not long after that we'll find out about their own sexual abuse and sexual misconduct allegations against them. The other one was the Jon Stewart situation, where on one end he says he never heard of these things and never heard of these rumors, and then there's this footage from years before that, where he was at a speaking event, and a college student brought up this issue, and he talked to him about it, and he kind of dismissed it as, well, that's just Twitter talk. I can't take any of that as any type of authenticity whatsoever. I'm sure when you guys came across that footage, that would have been something else, because that right there is almost a caught red-handed moment in regards to the whole open secret aspect of this whole situation and who knew what, and the excuses afterwards where kind of puts a lot of that into a negative light, I think.
Yeah, I think for us, going through the archive and then starting to kind of lay out the timeline and lay out the events and see how people were speaking in the media over the years was really illuminating. I think you can see with Jon Stewart, I do think it's interesting to see how his comments on the topic evolve. Obviously, we have no idea what he did or didn't know. But I think that he, in some ways, is kind of a stand-in for some viewers of being dismissive about this in the beginning. And then in the Howard Stern interview, he talks about, if I had known this earlier, would I have still worked with Louis? I probably would have. And I think that is quite honest and likely, true for probably a lot of people who maybe have dealt with people who have behaved in this way in their life. So I think the archive for us was a way of really raising questions, but also seeing how people reacted to the women. You can see kind of the vitriol that emerges towards them in the aftermath of 2017. And then I also think with the archive, sort of seeing how Louis admitted what had happened in his statement, and then seeing his comedy specials and how he changes how he talks about what had happened and turns it into a kink and implies that people had said yes. And I think that that was really quite striking for us, and to really just kind of lay it out for the viewers, I think, felt like a way to raise questions about that.
Caroline, can I just change tack a little bit, just talk about the structure of the documentary? It's kind of divided into parts. You have like part one, and you kind of like focus on certain individuals in these parts. When it comes to putting together a structure for a documentary, there's so many ways you can go. You could do narration, you could do, people like to add animations, all sorts of different ways. How far into the process do you know how yourself and Cara want to have this film structured and presented? Because I'm really curious about that in regards to representing a documentary film.
Yeah, so I think what was always like a priority in terms of the film structure from the very beginning, before we started editing, was how do we tell this story and not make it wrapped around Louis? So we don't, we don't want, part of the goal was to give some of the women who came forward like the time and space to really talk about what, speak their minds, and also just to get to know them as people. So how do we do that and not make them just kind of, if Louis is like the tree, how to not just make them branches off of his story? So I think early on the idea of having the film be in chapters was one solution to that. And as we started to build the film, we kind of maybe moved away from it and then came back to it when we realized like that was a way to make the film in our eyes work and accomplish that goal more so than if we just told a linear story or a chronological story. So
Cara,
that's,
no, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, that was it.
The Matt's Movie Reviews podcast is brought to you by TeePublic. TeePublic is the world's largest marketplace for independent creators to sell their work on the highest quality merchandise. With over 1.2 million designs, TeePublic is sure to have something you love. Thank you. Cara, I got to ask, this is a moment in the film where yourself and Caroline were outside of a Louis C.K. show. I think it was before the Madison Square Garden show. You're talking to his fans, and a lot of them were talking about either, he's done his, I wouldn't say he's done his penance because he hasn't really done his penance, but he's done his time, I guess some would say, and others say, well, it's not that bad and such. And it led me to a couple of conclusions. I just want to present them to you. It might be silly. I don't know. I'm just going to put it out there anyway. Do people forget the outrageousness of what he did is because his celebrity kind of elevates him above the act? Or do you think people forget about the outrageousness of what he did because maybe in a kind of twisted way, we're kind of living in, or have been for a very pornified generation, and people kind of look at this content so much that they kind of see it as normal? How do you kind of take on a lot of these kind of dismissive reactions a lot of people had towards Louis' act, which by all means it might not be illegal as some people say, but it's incredibly immoral and unethical?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's of course different for all sorts of people. I think for us, in talking to people outside of Madison Square Garden, I think you have some people who just don't really know all of the details. I think they just read a couple headlines and they were a huge Louis fan, and some time has passed and they feel like, I want to enjoy my Saturday night and go out to this show. And they're just not really thinking about it. They just wanted to, have a nice evening. And I think that for people who really loved Louis and maybe have been watching his special since and don't know all of the details, I think they might buy into how he has changed the story in his work about it being a kink, or people have said yes. So I think that might be one thing. I think it's hard to just believe negative things about the people we love. But I also think that I think what I realized in making the film is how much we do think about sexual harassment in terms of like very black and white terms. of like, was this illegal or not? So I think people think, okay, this wasn't illegal, so therefore I don't really need to worry about it. Like I can just continue to like this artist. And I think that for me, it raised more the question of, it doesn't really thinking about whether or not this was illegal or not kind of misses the point. And really the basic question is, do we think it is fair to subject people to this kind of behavior?
And Caroline, I think something that really comes through is that whether it be, the stand-up comedy world or other aspects of entertainment or anywhere else, when it comes to power, when someone finds himself in a position of power and they can have influence on the lives of people with it that's underneath them, whether they are, peers or what have you, it's amazing how people can just turn a blind eye because some of this stuff, like just for for myself, I'm Catholic, and when the whole Catholic Church kind of thing came out, I think a lot of people kind of were kind of dismissive, or like, well, that's just an attack on us. And then as more and more stuff kind of come out, we have to come to the realizations that we're getting some incredibly evil, nefarious things have happened here. And I think people can't help sometimes, but to just kind of close ranks around, even around the abuser. And I think it says something about us as human beings at the end of the day.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a certain conditioning to how we think about things, and I think part of it is generational. Like for me, it was really hard for me to kind of stop not obsessing, but thinking about this idea of, was it that bad? Because younger people would say, yeah, but that is really bad. Would you have any friends who would do that? And I thought, oh, okay, well, that puts it in a different perspective. I hope not. I would be shocked if someone I knew did do that. So I think it's really hard once you grow up with certain normalized behavior or just thinking this is okay, to then kind of switch your perspective. And even after working on a film like this, it's still hard to kind of fight against your knee-jerk reaction of like, is it that bad? And think about like, as Milena says in the film, like if this happened at a bank, that would be totally unacceptable. Like if you can just kind of pivot your perspective a little bit, it changes everything. So when you think about it in those terms, like, of course, this is not acceptable behavior. And if you think about like, what happened to the women who came forward afterward, it's not okay. The kind of hatred that they were subjected to. So I think it is hard for us as like humans to kind of change our beliefs or or just fight against our knee-jerk reactions. But I think, what we tried to do in the film is just lay it out factually. And we thought that was kind of powerful in itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think at the end of the day, just going back to the first question I had for you, Caroline, is that where do you draw the line? I think is the question that a lot of people need to ask themselves. And I really hope that people do ask themselves that question when they do watch Sorry Not Sorry, coming out July 12th, theaters and be on demand. I do recommend everyone, if you can see it in a theater, do so, because we need to have more people in cinemas sitting down watching independent films, documentaries, etc., especially for a movie like this. I think Sorry Not Sorry is a movie that needs to be a bit of a wake-up call, because I think people have been a little too placid in regards to the whole situation. And I think it's really great that you both put the work in here and told the story again and have made sure that the voices that need to be heard have been now. So congratulations to you both, and thank you both for your time today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much. You also. Thank you.
Thank you for watching the Matt's Movie Reviews channel. Please subscribe for more reviews, podcast interviews, and exclusive content.